from Nabeel's book, and he speaks, this is on page 217, he speaks about the first time he went to the Hadith on his own, and he speaks about some of what David just said in the beginning about the first revelation. Check this out. Quoting, "For the first time in my life, instead of being directed to a Hadith, I was reading them with my own eyes, straight from the source. It did not take long for me to realize that the Muhammad I had come to know was a filtered version. Honestly, it took me about 30 seconds. In the very first volume, the third Hadith told the familiar story of Muhammad's first revelation in the cave of Hira. It included the details I had learned in childhood, but there were more particulars here than I had heard before. Instead of recounting that the angel simply asked Muhammad to recite, Muhammad reports that, quote, the angel caught me forcefully and pressed me so hard that it could not bear it anymore, end quote. Each time the angel asked Muhammad to recite, the angel pressed Muhammad so hard that he could not bear the pressure. After his encounters with the angel, Muhammad returned to his wife terrified, his, quote, heart beating severely. After this, the angel did not come back for a while, and the divine inspiration paused. This was not the picture of Muhammad I had come to know. It was raw, far less flattering. Here is an unfiltered, or at least a less filtered version of Muhammad. What's more, there was a cross-reference to another hadith in Sahih Bukhari that elaborated even further, 9111. I retrieved volume 9 from Abba's bookcase, found hadith 111, and read through it. In an instant, the hadith shattered my illusion of familiarity with Muhammad. It said that when he saw Gabriel, his, quote, neck muscles twitched in terror. And when Gabriel had gone for a while, the prophet became so depressed, quote, that he attempted several times to throw himself from the tops of high mountains, and every time he went up the top of a mountain in order to throw himself down, Gabriel would appear before him and say, "Oh, Muhammad, you are indeed Allah's apostle in truth," whereupon his heart would become quiet and he would calm down, end quote. I was shocked, motionless. Was this Sahih Bukhari really saying Muhammad contemplated suicide? As if to emphasize, the hadith went on to say that whenever the break in inspiration became long, quote, he would do as before, but when he used to reach the top of a mountain, Gabriel would appear before him, end quote. I stared at the book in disbelief. Far from a noble call to prophethood, Muhammad was violently accosted by a spiritual force that terrified him, driving him to contemplate suicide on multiple occasions. And this was not just my book. This was Sahih Bukhari, the most trustworthy of hadith. It was then that I began to realize that I inherited an airbrush image of Muhammad.
Vocab, on a side note that brings us back to something earlier there. As far as the satanic verses are concerned and Muhammad's suicide attempts, again, notice your average Muslim believes that Muhammad was completely sinless. He was completely sinless. That's what your average Muslim believes. We go to the Quran, we find that Allah telling Muhammad to ask forgiveness of his sins. So the Muslim belief wouldn't even be consistent with the Quran itself. But when you read about the things Muhammad did, even if we're not talking about, having sex with a 9-year-old girl or taking the divorced wife of your own adopted son after causing the divorce, even if we're not talking about things like that, just things that according to Islam would be sins, right? Suicide would be a sin according to Islam. And Muhammad's trying to commit suicide. Gabriel has to keep stopping him but think about what that tells you about Muhammad's character. Something goes wrong or he's worried about being embarrassed and he runs to a cliff to hurl himself off because he's worried that people are going to call him demon possessed. So he tries to kill himself. And then people convince him that he's actually receiving revelations. And then when the revelations stop, he runs to a cliff and tries to kill himself. There's a guy who anytime anything goes wrong, he wants to run to a cliff and jump off. That's the ultimate moral example of Muslims. And beyond that, according to Islam, what's the worst possible sin? Well, that would be shirk, associating partners with Allah. And it's the worst possible sin you can commit in Islam. And what did Muhammad do? He delivered a revelation saying that you could pray to Allat, Alusa, and Manat, 3 pagan goddesses. Who are these? These are Allah's partners who can carry your prayers to Allah. And it wasn't just that Muhammad did this within himself, in his mind. He taught his Muslim followers, the entire Muslim community, to do this. And he told the pagans that they should do this, that this is the way to pray to Allah. Go through your 3 pagan goddesses. So far from Muhammad being sinless. Muhammad committed the worst possible sin in the worst possible way, not just by doing it himself, but by enforcing this on his own community and the community of the pagans, affirming their polytheistic worship. So Muhammad he's done the worst thing you can possibly do in Islam. Your average Muslim, no, he was perfectly sinless. Why? It's just one of the myths that Muslims pass around among themselves. And like Nabeel, they have their information filtered for them so that your average Muslim has never even heard of the satanic verses unless he's heard that it's a book written by Salman Rushdie.
Yeah, just to add to that real quick, because it was while you guys were talking about the satanic verses, somebody in the chat said, a Muslim said, guys, stop arguing for this that Muslims do not believe, sign of desperation. So he's saying that Muslims don't believe this. But what's so funny about this is that, I mean, this is kind of what Vocab just read out of Nabeel's book. Yeah, Muslims may not believe this per se or whatever. Yeah. That doesn't mean that it's not in the sources. And that's what we're trying to get you guys to understand too. So that's why if you think that we're wrong, and this is the thing is, a lot of people try to say that, you know, they say like David Wood's a liar. They say people are liars all the time. Anybody that disagrees with their religion, they say often a lot of the times that they're intentionally lying. And that's psychologically, that feels a lot better than having to wrestle with what the person's saying. Because if you can say David Wood's a liar, then you're like, oh, he's just making up these verses. And people say that David Wood's making up hadiths and stuff like this, like making papers and stuff like that to put on videos. But in reality, that's why you need to check out the sources for yourself, because you can't just write it off saying he's a liar in order to disregard everything that he has to say. So anyways, I just wanted to go ahead and add that.
All right. Hey, Vocab.
Let me add something real quick. Just
add another 20-minute conversation. Go ahead.
No, very brief. You see what I got here? You see what I got here? Shameless Shamoun.
I got that too, buddy.
Now notice what the Muslim said. Well, don't bring up something Muslims don't believe. Well, which Muslim? Muslims today who've had their information filtered for them, or the early Muslims who all knew about this? Which one? Right. This is called Before Orthodoxy, the Satanic Verses in Early Islam by Shahab Ahmed.
Yeah.
Who was a Harvard and Princeton trained scholar in Islamic studies. And he has in here not one, not two, not three, not four, not five, not 10, not 20, not 30, not 40, but 50 Muslim sources on the satanic verses. But listen, you guys, hey, don't bring up something that you have in 50 Islamic sources when Muslims today don't believe it because we've been lied to. Oh my goodness. Right. This is why you need us. Now think about this. If someone were at all concerned for truth and for reality, someone would say, you know, if my leaders never tell me something that's in the Muslim sources and you guys have 50 sources telling you something that I've never been told, please tell me what it is so I know the truth about my prophet. And what's the Muslim response? No, don't tell us the truth about our prophet. Don't tell us what the early Muslim community knew about him. Only tell us what we already believe because we've been lied to. Now, how can you be like this, right? I mean, it's been pointed out what kind of people do not want to know the truth? It's very strange. All right, go ahead.
Yeah. Do you need another 50 minutes to make a point that would have took you 5 minutes to make? All right. Are you ready? Hey, listen, are we ready? Because I'm afraid I'm going to talk and I'm going to get cut off.
Hey, by the way, you all notice that Sam talked for like 35 minutes, and I give a totally dope defense of the Muhammad and the Satanic verses, and then he gets all antsy, like, hey, I've gone 5 minutes without speaking. All right, but go ahead, Sam.
Well, since you bring it up, Sam, I got a super chatter. Alex James 2020, blessings from the UK. Thank you for opening our eyes to the truth. Praise be to the Almighty. All right, Sam, there you go.